Sir, we are now being recorded. The session is live. Welcome everybody to another installment of Leaders in the Force. Today we have the pleasure of hearing from and speaking with Brigadier General Kevin Admiral. He is currently the Armor School Commandant at Fort Benning, Georgia. Brigadier General Admiral has been the Commandant of the Armor Branch since September of 2019. Sir, thank you for donating your time, your experience, your wisdom to mentor the next generation of leaders. I'm going to open up the floor to you for any opening remarks.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. And like Juan said, I'm the 52nd Armor School Commandant. I'm responsible for training all armor soldiers. Those are cavalry scouts who conduct reconnaissance and security. So they're finding the enemy for commanders out there, as well as our non-commissioned officers who serve in all of our brigade combat teams, and then all of our officers, armor officers, who serve as tank and scout platoon leaders within our three brigade combat types within the Army inventory. And so we have about 17,000 students and trainees who come through the Armor School each year. But more importantly, I'm excited to have the opportunity to speak to the cadets there at FAMU. I had the pleasure of attending your leadership conference last spring, and hopefully we can continue this conversation and I can convince some of you to become armor officers.
Absolutely, sir. So for anybody that's jumping into this interview series, the purpose of Leaders in the Force is to provide cadets more exposure to all branches, but specifically we're also targeting a particular community of combat arms, leaders from the combat arms, and particularly African American and Hispanic leaders in combat arms. So sir, you obviously support this effort. You've done a lot of outreach with HBCUs. I understand we're your 7th engagement this month. Can you please speak as to why you support this effort? Why is it important that the Army as an institution dedicate its organizational energy into promoting accessions for African American cadets into combat arms, since the door's wide open?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think it's critically important to ensure that our leadership within the combat arms units, but across the Army at large, looks like America, represents all the different soldiers that we have within our formations. And so we need to have African Americans and Hispanics and Asians and women of all races to serve in combat arms units. And of course, as the Chief of Armor and the Armor Commandant, I want you to be in an armor branch. But it's important so that they can improve the team. They can make sure that they're serving as role models for the soldiers and non-commissioned officers that are serving in our formations, and then also continue to do outreach to the various commissioning sources that we have within our Army, and then continue to serve and grow as leaders and become senior officers within our Army, who can then make a difference across their various communities, who can then we deploy, be it in war or as a part of a training exercise, that they're able to then show America is a rainbow. And we have people of all colors and both genders who are serving here within our formations.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So that's why you support it. But for the next question, can you give your assessment or your best estimate as to what is causing this deficit in diversity in combat arms? I'm on the ground. I'm an R2C instructor at Florida A&M University, and I have my hypotheses. But first, I'm going to ask you as for yours.
Yeah, I think that's not a simple answer to that. It's been a problem for many years, and some of it has to do cultural. Some of it has to do with the fact that we do lack minorities within our combat arms units, and so some people feel that they want to be in a branch that may have more leaders that look like them. But I will tell you that when the cultural piece of believing that the minority soldiers are going to be on the front lines and that they're going to be disproportionately injured or killed, that may have been a case during Vietnam. That's not necessarily the case today. It's absolutely not the case today. So I commanded an infantry battalion in the 1st Armored Division at Fort Bliss, and then also in Afghanistan. In my battalion, obviously I'm African American. There were 2 African American other officers besides me, and about 25 African Americans across the battalion of just over 800 people. So the vast majority of the soldiers and officers in my unit were white Americans. And so the thought that, hey, only in the combat arms are we putting minorities in the front lines, that's not the case. So I think that's one of the issues that I think some people think. The other thing I think when it comes to serving in these organizations, again, they may think, well, I need to be in a unit that has a lot of people that look like me. And if you go out to any organization in the civilian world or anywhere else, for African Americans, we make up about 13% of the U.S. population. And so as you look, and then of that, only a certain percentage are going to go to college. Of that, only a certain percentage have a propensity to serve in the military. And so as the armor commandant, I compete with 15 other commandants for a very small pool of individuals. And so one, you have to want to be in the Army. Then you have to want to serve in a combat arms versus a combat support or service support unit. And so the numbers across the board are not going to be high because you have 16 branches competing for the same number of cadets every year, roughly 4,000 to 5,000 cadets from ROTC and West Point each year that we're trying to recruit into the various branches. And so some of it has to be self-determination that you want to do that. And then we as the branches and branch commandants and then all the leaders out there in the operating force have to ensure that our formations, they are welcoming and that they're a positive environment where each person's talents can be tapped into, and then each of the leaders that are in those organizations can reach their full potential at each of the grades that they serve in. And hopefully that makes sense to you. But I mean, that's what I think has to happen. And that's one of the problems that we're trying to tackle. I'm glad you're doing this, is we can dispel some of the myths and some of the rumors. We can answer questions and then do follow-ups for cadets who continue to be on the fence or unsure what they want to do in the Army.
Thank you, sir. I agree. It's definitely a multifaceted problem. Can't be explained by one single hypothesis. But as far as not feeling represented in combat arms spaces, I hope that this interview series helps to alleviate that by providing perspectives like yours and then the other videos that we've recorded. Sir, I also see this problem as an information problem. When I ask my students what they want to branch, and when they disclose their motivations for joining the Army, they say that it's kind of an instrument for economic and social mobility. So they're looking for jobs that they think are easily relatable, translatable to civilian occupations. So they see the Adjutant General Corps, they see Quartermaster as these very translatable skills that they can take to work in industry. And the purpose of this interview and the follow-up questions are going to help to elucidate how is being a maneuver leader, specifically an armor leader, going to make you marketable. Because I want my cadets to understand being a maneuver leader isn't just being cold, being wet, being tired. It's so many other things. Yes, there's some sacrifice. Yes, it is physically challenging. But there are many other developmental opportunities in all domains within the enterprise. So that's how I am tackling this problem as a patent officer at FAMU. So, sir, without further ado, we're going to tackle this problem. So can you please explain your decision-making process back when you were a cadet and tell us why you decided to branch armor?
Thanks for that question. So when I was in ROTC at the University of Kansas, my professor of military science was an armor officer, and then the majority of the cadre were combat arms officers and non-commissioned officers. So I always wanted to do something in combat arms, and my two decisions were infantry versus armor, with the initial goal of doing a certain amount of time commanding a company and then going to medical school. So I wanted to have the mental challenge, the physical challenge. I wanted to be involved in something that was technologically challenging, provided me to have hands-on with some kind of mechanical systems. And so my professor of military science at the time said, Kevin, you would make an awesome tank platoon leader. And so from freshman year, sophomore year, I had the same message coming to me about you should be a tank platoon leader. So I did my research on that, but I was still torn between infantry and armor. And then my junior year, we had a new PMS. He happened to come in as another armor officer, and he came in and he said, Kevin, you would make an awesome tank platoon leader. And so now I had, for 3 straight years of ROTC, my PMS telling me this, and then our instructors, again, we only had one non-combat arms instructor. So all of our instructors were combat arms and who really hammered home the importance of being combat arms leaders, the challenges that you have faced, the crucibles you'd go through, and how you'd come out stronger on the other end. And so as I went to the advanced camp, which was, now it's called cadet summer training, but advanced camp then, we had a chance to go and have branch day. We participated in all these different training exercises and witnessed each of the branches put on their demonstration. And the one that impressed me the most was the tank platoon demonstration. And so I saw the firepower that a tank platoon had. It was a lieutenant who jumped out of the tank and explained to all of us in the audience what he was responsible for, the things that he could do with his tanks. And I said, you know what, I can do that. And that's how I made that decision. And I don't regret it. I've been doing it now for 26 and a half years, and I would do it all over again if I was a cadet.
Thank you, sir. I'm glad that you had that amount of exposure to combat arms leaders. I think that's another factor to the nascence of this project. I'm a graduate of West Point, and at West Point there's hundreds of staff and faculty, and they really do, I guess, promote the combat arms. But then when I look at my my organization here at Florida A&M University, there's only 2 commissioned officers. So there's not a lot of breadth of perspectives from which to draw from. But USAC Cadet Command is implementing solutions or initiatives that try to alleviate this. So the patent program, the Cavazos internship program, places lieutenants from combat arms at HBCUs, at majority Hispanic institutions, to try to alleviate that breadth. So, sir, we just heard why you chose Army. You wanted a challenge. You wanted to work with mechanical systems, and you had mentors who were able to look at your personality and see it and recommend this as a best fit. With your experience having held commands from company all the way to brigade, and having served on staffs at multiple echelons, how would you translate that experience to a civilian employer? So,
as a combat arms officer, really as any of our commanders, but for me as an armor officer, I've been involved in talent management, project management, logistics planning, strategic planning, being able to communicate effectively with various audiences, and being able to convey thoughts, motivate and inspire people to accomplish tasks and missions that maybe they didn't think they could do, or that they thought was impossible. So on the talent management piece, making sure that I can do self-development, right? Making myself a better leader. People pay a lot of money for that. And we talk about that from the day you're in ROTC or West Point all the way through, our various professional military education programs, about how important it is to have institutional training, operational experience, and self-development. So the talent management piece. As a combat arms platoon leader, an armor platoon leader, or scout platoon leader, developing your subordinates and developing your leaders so that they can replace you, and making sure they understand how to accomplish tasks and missions that you're going to give them. Putting the right people at the right job and on the right mission. I mean, that's the talent management piece that I think that comes to mind. Project manager. You have to ensure that your tanks or your Bradleys or your Strykers, that those vehicles are combat ready. And so you've got to make sure that you understand maintenance and how to make sure that those systems are fully effective and maximized to the extent possible on the battlefield. And so your ability to develop a program within your unit on training the people, maintaining the equipment, and accounting for the equipment. That's all translatable to project management, because you have to stay on budget, right? You blow an engine, that's $500,000. And then as you peel back the onion on that to understand what happened, oh, maybe it's because you didn't ensure your personnel were properly trained. Logistics planning, ensuring that your unit has the resources that it needs, coordinating with the battalion's maintenance officer and maintenance staff to ensure that you have the mechanical support, the logistical support that you need, coordinating with the forward support company to ensure that you have the food and water and fuel that you need to operate, and then making sure that actually lasts over the duration of whatever training event that you're responsible for. And so I think that's translatable depending on where you go. Strategic planning. And so as a staff officer, I had the opportunity to serve as the Deputy Chief of Plans for Multinational Division in Iraq from 2007 to 2009, where we had over 40,000 soldiers, 7 brigades assigned to the division. And my job was to bring together all the different staff planners to turn the division commander's guidance and his vision into actionable orders for those supported units. And so being able to do that helped me with strategic planning and making sure I was able to communicate with the Corps commander, who happens to now be the Secretary of Defense, and that products that we produced were briefed to the president from things that we worked on as a young major with a team of 17 other majors. That those were things that we used on the future of Baghdad province. And then effective communication. That's critical for the military. It's also critical in the civilian world. Your ability to provide clear, concise advice to people, clear, concise decisions or guidance. That's all developed over the course of your career, whether or not that's 4 years in the Army or 40 years. And so, I served as an aide to the Chief of Staff of the Army from 2009 to 11 when I came out of Iraq. And, if you don't understand who the Chief of Staff, he is the senior Army officer in the Army. He translates to being a CEO, which happens to have CEO of a 1.1 million person organization. And so I had the opportunity to advise him on things when he made speeches or as he engaged with different audiences, particularly if those audiences were my year or younger, and letting him understand what was going on inside of battalions and squadrons in our Army. And so that was one of the keys. And then, of course, being his aide, that meant I traveled with him, and I was in every meeting that he was in. And so I got to understand executive leadership and executive decision making, strategic communications, and how do you turn vision into action for an organization the size of the U.S. Army. So I think all those things come from serving in a combat arms unit, serving as an armor officer. You have all those opportunities, and that could be here in the United States in a peacetime, or you could be responsible for those kinds of things in combat operations.
Thank you, sir. I think as long as our viewers, our listeners can understand the central role of the combat arms leaders, specifically, in my opinion, the maneuver leaders, we are the client that reaches out to the other domains in the enterprise for logistics, for personnel support, but we are the ones who have to plan, who make up the plans, and then reach out to the external organizations for support. So even if you are armor, even if you're infantry, you will have your hand in logistics planning, in personnel services support.
Right. And let me add to that. And so as you progress in your career and rank, you have to understand all of those different aspects. So we have the warfighting functions that cover the different requirements that we have and tasks that are required to execute to achieve various objectives. And so as a battalion commander, you have to understand personnel management. You're going to have to understand operations and planning. You're going to have to understand logistics and sustainment of your organization. You're going to have to understand, again, project management, talent management. And so all those things are reinforced at every grade that you progress to in the Army as a combat arms officer. And so you have logistics officers and you have human resources, adjutants general officers, intelligence officers, signal officers who are technical experts. But as a combat arms officer, you have to understand all of those things. And how do you bring them together, synchronize them at the right time and space on the battlefield? And so, while yes, you can serve in a combat support or surface support organization, but at some point there's going to be a combat arms officer who is going to direct the actions that you take in support of soldiers who are on the front lines.
I just had a visual analogy of an orchestra director, right? The combat arms officer is directing and synchronizing the different pieces. You have the strings, you have the woodwinds, but at the central location is the combat arms leader synchronizing those effects. Sir, I think you make a pretty compelling argument for cadets who are considering combat arms, but now I want to refine it. What would you say to a cadet who is looking at infantry and looking at armor and not sure whether to go yellow or blue?
Oh. Well, of course, if you go to the combat arms, a decision. It's the best branch, right? But in all seriousness, I think if you are an officer who wants to again be challenged, you're technologically adept, you're good at problem solving, you're innovative. You like to operate in an ambiguous environment, and you also want to have to make decisions at a pace that's much faster than the infantry. So what do I mean by that? So as a tank platoon leader or company commander, you have to be able to maneuver your formation from one point of the battlefield to another at up to 45 miles an hour, while doing all those things earlier that we talked about, synchronizing this, this orchestra of all those different enablers that come in support of our combat arms units. And so as an armor officer, I mean, you're in charge as a lieutenant, you'd be in charge of 4 tanks or 6 Bradleys or 6 Strykers or 6 Humvees. And your job is either to find the enemy and pass that information back to those who are now close with and destroy, or you may be leading an element, a tank platoon or mobile gun system platoon that's going to close with and destroy the enemy directly. And while again doing all this planning effort and doing it at a pace that's much faster than a lot of our other branches, all while then planning for the next operation. And so I think if you like that, if you want, again, you want to be physically challenged, mentally challenged, you like mechanical, mechanics, if you like technology, we're constantly upgrading our tanks and Bradleys and making sure that we can outpace our adversaries. If you want to have to develop new ideas and solve tough problems, Armor Branch is for you. And that's what I'd offer to you.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to ask a follow-up question from that because I think having the Armor Commandant in front of me, there's no better person to ask. And it's about the concept of identity convergence. I was thinking about it this weekend while I was preparing for this. Given that both infantry and armor captains attend maneuver captain's career course, one combined course, and you commanded an infantry battalion, right? Are maneuver leaders interchangeable at a certain point? Is the identity of both branches converging into one? Why or why not?
I don't think we're converging into one. What we do is we make sure that each of our branches understands what the other's role is, and then we also work together to understand how do we offset the limitations of each branch. And so we bring everybody together, the maneuver captain's career course, because we don't have armor captains or infantry career course anymore. We have one, and we're here at the Maneuver Center of Excellence, where we're going to harness the best of both branches and make sure that our officers understand how do we fight combined arms. And so at the lieutenant level for platoons, we want you to be technical and tactical experts at the platoon level. But as you progress and mature as leaders and as a company commander, as a captain, then we have to make sure you understand how do we bring all of those together as a company commander, and how do you, as working on staff, helping the battalion commander to synchronize all the different enablers in support of these direct close combat forces. So I don't believe that we have a convergence. We don't need to have that, and we shouldn't have that going forward. We each have different roles, right? So infantry has one role, armor has one role, and we work together in concert, again, offsetting the limitations of each formation and out there, and then maximizing what we bring to the fight at the right point on the battlefield.
Thank you, sir. I hope this message doesn't get out to Brigadier General Hani, but I just want to say that from my experience with my armor lieutenant peers, coming out of ABOLIC, they were a lot better prepared to deal with the maintenance side of being a leader in the force. I think infantry, the schoolhouse should look at the armor schoolhouse and see how those lieutenants are coming out better prepared to manage the maintenance process, I think, at the organizational level, because you guys do it right. So, sir, this wraps up the questions that I had for you. Again, I want to thank you for offering your experience and your mentorship to not just my cadets here at FAMU, but the cadets all over the country at ROTC programs nationwide who will benefit from listening to this interview. At this time, I'll cede the floor for any closing remarks.
Well, thanks again for this opportunity. I'm excited to support anything that is going to help us bring in the right kinds of officers into our Army. And so, again, if you're interested in learning about talent management, project management, logistics planning, strategic planning, all those kinds of things, you can do that inside of a Combat Arms. I know sometimes people think about, hey, how do I get a transferable skill? But I'd ask you, what are you actually looking for? And what do you think what does that really mean to you, a transferable skill? Because companies out there would pay a lot of money for the leadership skills that you gain in Combat Arms units. And I know a number of my friends who either stayed in or retired or were Combat Arms officers and got out at certain points of their career. And every one of them that I know has been very successful. And the success, they attribute that to what they learned in BOLIC, Armor BOLIC, what they learned in their time in tank and infantry battalions across our Army, both here in the States, overseas, and well as deployment. And so I would just offer that to you as you think through and go through your decision making on what branch to pick. Don't cross off Combat Arms because you think you can't translate that. You're not taking the killing capability that the Combat Arms units are doing that. You're bringing in how do you solve problems? How do you build a team? How do you inspire people? And the fact that you can go through various challenges and come out. You're results oriented, right? You like to cooperate and be a good teammate. And then the leadership that you gain in building and bringing together all these different type A personality folks into a coherent organization that is focused on a vision and can achieve goals set forth by yourself or your higher headquarters. I think you will see that as a Combat Arms officer, and you will see it absolutely as an armor officer in our Army. So thanks again for the opportunity, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir. All right, for everybody tuning in, this wraps up, finalizes our interview with Brigadier General Admiral. Thank you all for watching.